So I think the security roles and groups is one of the most powerful and versatile features of SuiteCRM, but with this beauty comes a certain degree of complexity. So what I'm going to do is create a 3-part video tutorial in which we're going to start with the very basics, and I'm going to really dumb it down in a sense that it's maybe even a bit painful to watch for some people, but it's going to make things extremely clear in regards to what are roles and what are groups and how you can work with them. So we'll start with some theory, and then we'll try to take a look at a real life example. So the theory here is that we have the 4 entities that are interacting with each other. We have the security groups, we have the roles that can be applied onto the groups, we have the users, and then we have the records. So let's say your company has a candy department that is in charge of selling candies, and it has some candy salespeople that are in charge of selling these candies. So what we would do is we would add these salespeople onto the candy group. Then we would add the products onto the candy group. So we're adding the candy salespeople to the candy group. We're adding the candy products to the candy group. And then we're assigning the role. So let's say the role is going to be viewing, but no editing. So what that means is that the users that are part of the security group will be able to view, but they will not be able to edit the records which are part of this group. So to dumb it down even more, to make it even more obvious, we're going to use an analogy. So the analogy here is going to be that our group, let's say it's going to be sort of like a supermarket, where we have the various products. Let's say these are candies, and then we have the users that are also inside that supermarket. So what we're doing is we're adding a new group. To that group, we're going to add a role. So we're going to create a role, and then we're going to add the role, which is going to say, hey, users, you can view the candies, but you cannot touch the candies. You cannot edit the candies. Then we're going to add the actual candies on inside our supermarket to our group. And then we're going to add the sales people into our group also. So then what is going to happen is that once the users access the group records, there's these 2 security guys that are going to be checking the permissions. They're going to be saying sort of like, hey, okay, wait a second. So you're entering the supermarket. One thing I got to tell you is that you can view, but don't touch any of the candies, right? This is the roles that are getting checked based on the security group itself. So now that the theory is out of the way, let's go ahead and actually create all of the above, which is going to make it more obvious. So if you remember in the step 1 here, we're adding a new group. So the way that you would do it within the system is you would go to the admin tab, you would go down to the section called user management. I like to do it through here, and you would click on create. Oops, no, you're actually going to create a security group. Here we're going to say it's going to be candy group, right? The not inheritable part will be covered a little bit later on, but for now we're just going to leave it as checked off, which means that it is inheritable. We're not check marking this. If this was check marked, that means that it's not inheritable. We're prohibiting the inheritability, if that's a word. So now we're going to save the group. So that part is done. Now we're going to add a new role. So if I go to select the role, I will notice that my role is not here. So that means that I just need to add the role first. So we're going to go to the role management. Inside the role management, we're going to click on create role. Here we're going to say, let's say we're going to give it a super obvious name like this, group view, but don't touch. We're going to click on save. And here what we can do is really granularly, we can control the type of access inside this specific role by module, on the module level. So here, first thing that we'll do is we'll set this to enabled. Delete, we're going to set to none. Edit, we're going to set to none. Export, none. Import, none. List, group. Mass update, none. View, group. We'll review this in a little bit more detail with another example in the future, but in the future video. But for now, just to explain briefly what this means. So if I set the group access to group here, when it comes to, let me just save it so it's more obvious, when it comes to the action called list. So in terms of just viewing the items, listing the items, I'm going to go ahead and say group. So what that means is that all of the items which are part of this group, so all of the candies which are part of this candy supermarket, can be viewed by anyone who is inside this group. So that means that these people accessing this group here, the items within this group, will be able to view all of the candies which are inside this group, regardless of who created it, who's done what. If the candy is part of this group, this person will be able to see it because he's also part of that group. That's what it means here. If we were to set the owner, that means that only if the candy is assigned to this specific user, then this specific user will be able to see only his candies. He would not be able to see the candies of other people. Now that this is saved, what we're going to do is go back to the security groups, and we're going to add that role that we just created, right? So we're going to go click on the security group here. We're going to click on roles. Here we're going to say select the group view, but don't touch role, right? And the next thing that we'll do is we'll add the products. So still inside the security group, we're adding the users. The user that I know that should definitely be there is the candy salesperson one, because that's the person that will be selling the candies for me. So that person is now also part of that group. What we'll do now is run a simple test and see what happens. Oh, no, actually I'm not. Why? Because I forgot to add the products to that group. Okay, so I added the user, I added the role, but I didn't add any of the products. So I'm going to go down to the inventory tab here. I'll click on the product which is candy related, so candy bar white chocolate. For sure that has to do with sweets, so I'll select the security group here, and then I'll select the candy group. So the candy group has been added. Another way that I would be able to do it is by going to the list view of this module here, select multiple items, and then select the group and do assign. So now we have two candies within this candy group. Right now I'll do a test by logging out and logging in as the candy salesperson. Now that I'm logged in as the candy salesperson, I'm going to go to the inventory section, and then I can only see the two chocolates that are part of that group. If you remember, we had a whole bunch of items here before, right? So what essentially happened here is that the candy salesperson went to the supermarket, and then these two guys are like, hey, okay, wait, based on what I see here, you are part of that candy group. And I see that inside that candy group, you can view stuff. Okay, so here's what I'll show you based on your roles that you were given because you are assigned to this group. So once again, the user is trying to view the records. The system, so these two guys, they tell him, okay, so you're part of the candy group, and inside the candy group you can view stuff, but you cannot edit stuff. So okay, so here are the records that you can view, but that you cannot edit. So the rest is hidden from that user. Obviously, this is not a perfect analogy, but it gets the point across. So here we can see the records, but we cannot edit it. So there is no edit button that is available, and no new records can be created for this item, because once again, I cannot edit the item, but I can view it here. That's a very simple analogy. So I can add more users to the same group, and these same users will be able to see the same chocolates that are part of this group, but they will never be able to edit any of them. So now what about the inheritance stuff that we reviewed before? So that's the stuff that we saw here inside the group, which is the not inheritable. Essentially what it means, it's very simple, is that if there is a new entity which let's say gets manifested that is related to the candy. So let's say these are like some sort of candy wrappers, right? So this candy wrapper is related to the candy. It gets created and assigned to the candy. Should that candy wrapper now inherit the same group or not? And this determines if it will or will not. So if this stuff is not checkmarked, that means that when the new candy wrapper is added, it will not, it will be part of that group because this is not checkmarked. If this is checkmarked like this, what will happen? And let's do a real life example. So let's say this is not checkmarked. I'm going to log in as the candy salesperson. Oh, and actually before logging in as the candy salesperson, I got to remember that the rules dictate that the users cannot modify anything within that group. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to say people that are part of this group can also edit stuff within this group. Otherwise, the candy salesperson wouldn't be able to add any new candy wrappers and stuff. So now I put the permission for edit action to group. So if I log in as the candy salesperson, I open up, now that I'm logged in as the candy salesperson, I will open up the chocolate. You can see that I have the edit button now. So here I'm going to add an option. Let's say an option is a wrapper. So let's say candy wrapper 1. I'm going to save. If I open up the candy wrapper, it's now part of the candy group. So let's go back, and now I'm going to check mark that option. So now that I'm logged in as the admin, I'm going to go to the candy group and I'll say not inheritable. Do not inherit from the parent. Now I've logged in as the candy salesperson once again. I think it was it the dark chocolate? Oh yeah, the candy wrapper. So now I'm going to say candy wrapper 2, but now it's set to not inherit. So I'm going to save, and when I open up the candy wrapper 2, I can see that the security group is not there. It did not inherit the security group, and this is dictated by the group setting. So the group setting says, hey, the stuff within this group do not inherit the group settings. And this is the very first part of the video, just the very basic stuff. And in the next videos, we'll review the more complex setups. If you found this helpful, please do leave a like and subscribe, as more of these videos will be made in the future. Thank you so much.